So, are we going to be having a broken universe match, deletion match between Matt Hardy and Chris Jericho? I guess we will see in the upcoming weeks. The challenge has been issued, and reports are it might not happen. So, we will have to see what ends up actually going on, because there seems to be a little bit of conflict between the sources here. So we'll get into it. Thanks for tuning into That's Wrestling. My name is Eric, and we are going to be reviewing the AEW Dynamite show from April 8th, 2020. If you'd like to be a co-host on this show, shoot me an email, eric@thatswrestling.com. If you're listening to this as a podcast and you'd like to join live, it is done on YouTube on the Thursday after Dynamite at 8 o'clock Eastern. So head over to YouTube and search for That's Wrestling and you will find it. It's also in the show notes of this episode as well. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can get this as a podcast as well on all your favorite podcast apps. And if you cannot find it on a particular app, shoot me an email, eric@thatswrestling.com, so I can get it added. And if you can't find it, you can always pick up the RSS feed at thatswrestling.com. So let's get into this show. Again, we are dealing with empty arena shows. They filmed this at QT Marshall's training center again, just like last week. The show starts off with a Jake the Snake promo. He is sitting in this leather chair just with a blacked out background, and he says that my history is not my destiny, will not be my destiny, and that is a quote of himself. And he says, would you stand in front of a train barreling down the tracks? Would you jump out of a plane without a parachute? Okay, would you stand in the ring looking at Lance Archer thinking that you have a prayer of winning? So he is equating that standing in front of a moving train and jumping out of a plane without a parachute is equivalent to standing across the ring from Lance Archer. It is not going to end well, and it is just an act of stupidity. He says all three things will wind up in the same position. Done. You step into the ring with Lance Archer and it's done. And he says, quit playing games, quit wishing. You saw what happened to poor Marco. No one else wanted it, and you saw the opportunity to prove you as a man. And sometimes it's better to be thought a fool than speak up and take action and remove all doubt. He says that he asked Cody not to let this one slip away, and he's looking for Cody to lose against Shawn Spears in the first round of the TNT title tournament, so he doesn't have to face Lance Archer in the finals. Very good opening promo. I mean, Jake the Snake is the master of promos like this, so it is not a surprise at all that this was really good. And we start off the show, it's Jericho on commentary with Tony Schiavone, which he keeps calling him Schiavone, or all these other funny names that Jericho always just purposely messes up his last name. There's actually a few more wrestlers in the crowd around ring, I guess you can call it a crowd, around ringside this week compared to last week. They made a ton of noise. I saw Billy and Austin Gunn. I saw Danny Jordan in there, so I'm assuming she has either some dark matches or she might actually have a match on Dynamite, which would be great to see. I have loved what I've seen of Danny Jordan. She's really good. Jimmy Havoc was out there as well. Shawn Spears was out there once in a while. Really, they just kind of churned through people, who was not having matches. They put some people out there if they weren't involved. There was actually, this episode had a good amount of wrestling, but two matches were just straight squash matches with jobbers. So the first one up, we had Lance Archer versus some jobber. I think his name was Alan Ingalls or something like that. They didn't put a thing up on the screen, and Jericho kept getting his name or changing his name which I'm assuming was purposeful because no one was going to remember him. Anyways, Jericho actually mentions that he met Lance Archer in New Japan. There was actually quite a lot of New Japan references from Jericho throughout the night. I don't know if that was purposeful or they just let him say whatever, and if he said something about another company, they just let it stay. Or, this was a taped match, so this was a taped show, so they could have edited it out if he said something that they didn't want him to say or something along those lines. So I hope at some point the relationship between New Japan and AEW does thaw out a bit. Archer gives this crazy overhead chokeplex. It was like he had the dude in a choke slam position, but ended up just throwing him backwards over his head. Hits the blackout, and it's over. I didn't notice it the previous times Lance Archer was out. He's actually using the same music that he had been using in New Japan, which is really cool. So he's maintaining at least that kind of continuity of his character and whatnot. Same exact song. Then next up we had Britt Baker versus Hikaru Shida. Personally, I didn't really think much of this match. I actually wrote down going into the first commercial break, it's like, well, this match isn't very good, and why is it happening? It did pick up after the commercial break, but earlier in the match, Britt gave Hikaru Shida a famouser and then blew a kiss to Billy Gunn, because of course that is his move. After a commercial break, that's when it finally picked up. Britt got a super bloody nose, and I'm not sure what it came from. They were exchanging some forearms, but it didn't look like Hikaru got anywhere near her face. That part of her face on her nose. So she got a bloody nose. Reports are saying she got a deviated septum. So it's not like a super, super broken nose, but it's probably didn't feel very good. But I think what might have actually did it, Hikaru Shida did a step-up ensiguri, and I believe Britt Baker hit herself in the nose with the arm that she was blocking it with. So she was protecting herself, and I believe that Hikaru Shida kicked pretty low, kind of like basically chest height, and I believe that actually hit Britt's arm and then forced her palm like into her face. So I think Britt actually kind of smashed her own nose, but she was bleeding like crazy. And then it kind of picked up a little bit, and the striking was a bit better, but again, she threw an awful super kick. Just looked horrendous. Missed Hikaru Shida's, didn't get anywhere near her head by a mile. It hit her probably on the just above the elbow on her bicep. It was really far away. But all in all, the ending was actually pretty cool. They got up onto the top rope. Hikaru Shida had Britt Baker up across her back and just dropped her across the top turnbuckle in a backbreaker, then hit a wicked shining wizard and picked up the 3 count there. So there's been a lot of people said they really enjoyed this match. Again, I definitely the first half of the match before the commercial break was nothing special. I wasn't really into it. Then I kind of got into it a little bit at the end. But I don't think it made up for the beginning of the match. I was just not a fan of how it worked out. But Hikaru Shida was perfectly fine in this match. I think it's mostly Britt Baker that is still super, super green. And like I said, that super kick was a mile away from Hikaru Shida's head. So it didn't look good at all. Just kind of hit her right above the elbow on the bicep. Yeah, was not good. She should probably really work on that. And her strikes look so weak. Hikaru Shida usually lays her stuff in. Britt Baker just looks like she's pulling so much stuff. Even like just like stomps to like the stomach or something. Like you don't really have to pull it that much, because you're not going to hurt the person if you're giving them a stomp to the stomach, especially somebody as strong as Hikaru Shida. I'm pretty sure she can take some shots to her abs without having any issue. So Britt definitely needs to tighten up her strikes a lot, because there's either a lot of space or they aren't near the mark at all and they just look horrible. So she definitely needs to tighten those up. Especially, I mean, it's fine if you're in an arena and the closest people from you are like 10 feet away or more, but when you have cameras in and you're cut in, especially, you know, in these days when you got high definition cameras and high definition 50, 60, 70 inch TVs, you can see that there is a foot of distance between whatever shot was being used. So definitely need to tighten those up. Next up, there is Kenny Omega and Michael Nakazawa. They looked like they were in some sort of RV or trailer or something along that line, some sort of trailer camper type of thing. Could have been like a bus or something like that. Anyways, they are talking, and Michael Nakazawa is trying to asking Kenny what their name should be, and he's like, "Well, we're best friends in real life, so why don't we call ourselves the Best Friends?" And Omega's like, "There's already a team called the Best Friends," and Michael Nakazawa is trying to convince him to take the name for themselves because he's an EVP and he can do whatever he wants. But then Orange Cassidy comes out of the bathroom and pushes open the door to the outside, and the rest of the Best Friends come in, and they're like, "We heard what you're talking about," and it's like, "No, that is our name, blah 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 blah," and just giving Omega and Nakazawa crap about wanting to name themselves Best Friends. And then after they leave, Kenny Omega is like, "I am getting too old for this shit." So I thought that was pretty funny. Very good Moxley and Hager video package. This is like the exact types of video packages I want to see in professional wrestling. It looks like something that they would have done on UFC. So they had tons of training footage. They had Jake Hager doing sit-down interview. They had Moxley doing sit-down type of stuff, just talking to the camera and whatnot. For Jake Hager, they're talking about he's been in a training camp for a MMA fight since February. So they have an interview with his coach, which I'm assuming is his legitimate coach. His wife, super heel, basically saying that this is a household of winners. If he doesn't win, he knows he can't come home. So man, she is running a tight ship, and he's got something to deal with at home, which I thought was very funny, but very good. Tons of training footage, tons of verbal jabs just going back and forth. There's a really long video package, but it was really, really good, just kind of laying out the motivations of each man. And this is the type of video package we should be seeing all the time in professional wrestling, because it was so well done. It had good narration. It had, like the movie trailer type guy doing narration for it. So it was really well done, like documentary style type of deal. And I really want to see these types of video packages used more. And it took up a ton of time, and I was not bored watching it. And next up, they have another video package. It's Cody and Shawn Spears. Goes through their history, the chair shot to the head that gave him a ton of stitches in the back of the head. Spears says that he wants to work his way to the top, and the only one way to do that is to knock people off one by one. Cody says he wants to be the TNT champion because of the stipulation that he can't go after the AEW Heavyweight Championship. Cody says that it's really cool that the network wanted to have a title named after them, that they want AEW to represent the network and all that. So that it was a really good video package. Once again, just going through the whole history of Shawn Spears and Cody since AEW started. Next up was a controversial match, I guess you could say. There's a lot of, it's very polarizing is probably the better word. It was a polarizing match. Of all the people I heard talking about this match, it seems pretty divisive, either that you hated it or you liked it. And there was kind of like very little in between. Personally, this match I thought was pretty fun. Usually I hate Michael Nakazawa's gimmick, but in this match, I thought it worked. So we had Michael Nakazawa and Kenny Omega versus Trent and Chucky T with Orange Cassidy at ringside. Spears is also at ringside, but behind the barrier, saying that he wants Michael Nakazawa to impress him. He's still looking for a partner. Jericho says that Nakazawa should really hide his baby oil better because he just had it sitting on the ring apron, and he's like, you got to put that in your trunks or your knee pads. And Jericho is saying that, if they shook me down before a match, they would find a fork, brass knuckles, a pencil, and Tony references Abdul the Butcher in regards to the fork. And Jericho says the line of the night. He says, "I learned from the best, Tony. I'll pull out a fork and cut a bitch. You wait and see." So I was laughing pretty good at that. Jericho was great on commentary for this. They came up with really funny names for some of the moves that Omega and Nakazawa were using, and I thought this match was perfectly fine. I thought it was a pretty funny match, and it seemed to be a lot of people just hated it and didn't want to see this type of wrestling on their screen. Good amount of comedy spots from Omega and Nakazawa. In this case, instead of Nakazawa using the baby oil to get out of some sort of body lock or hold, he used it to protect himself from chops from Trent. So like the chop would just slide off his chest. They had a move that was called by commentary the Mongrel Trail, which was basically a Kenny giving a Hikaru crusher to Michael Nakazawa, whose then head went into the crotch of, I believe it was Trent. I can't really remember. And then Michael Nakazawa did a train pull. He had Trent's legs under his arms, and he's pulling away with the ring post between him and Trent. You know what I'm talking about. And then they had what they called the hentai slide, which was Trent was straddling the top rope, and Michael Nakazawa just like pushed him down the length of the rope. And there's some pretty good spots with Orange Cassidy. At one point, Michael Nakazawa sprays baby oil in his face, and Orange Cassidy takes his glasses off and looks at him. Michael Nakazawa takes his glasses away, and as he's walking away to toss the glasses into the crowd or whatever, Orange Cassidy pulls out another pair of glasses and puts them on. There's a funny like hug spot where the best friends were going to go for their hug, but Nakazawa and Kenny Omega tripped them both, and they got into the ring, and it looked like Omega and Nakazawa were going to hug Orange Cassidy. Orange Cassidy steps aside on that and then does a dive to the outside onto Kenny. Unfortunately, Aubrey saw it and was looking at it but didn't do anything about it. They needed to pull the ref a little bit more, or she needed to remember not to watch Orange Cassidy leave the ring, because her back was originally to Kenny to the outside. So if she didn't follow Orange Cassidy with her head, it would have been fine. She wouldn't have seen it, but she definitely saw it because she followed Orange Cassidy with her head and saw the whole thing happen. Nakazawa then pulls his thong off and uses it like Mr. Sacco. They called it I don't remember what they called it. The scorpion something, the poison something. I don't remember what they called it now. I didn't write it down, unfortunately. Basically, he puts it over Trent's face and then accidentally puts it over Omega's face. And eventually, best friends hit strong zero on Nakazawa for the pin. Afterwards, they end up doing a 5-man hug spot, and that was the end of that. Next up, we go... Oh, I guess I should say, like I said, I thought this match was fun. I didn't have a problem with it. I usually have a problem with Michael Nakazawa's gimmick to use the baby oil to get out of a hold or something like this. In this case, I think it worked just fine. I'm curious how it would have played off with a crowd. I think with a crowd, it probably would have done much better. And, but if there was a crowd, we probably wouldn't be having this match because probably we would have Hangman available and all the other people who have not been available for these tapings because they are West Coast or whatever, or otherwise couldn't make it. Next up, we have a video of Brodi Lee. He's driving up to a AEW building. It appears something along those lines, like a warehouse type building or a training facility type of building. Brodi Lee drives up in a Hummer and gets out of the car, and a woman comes up behind him and puts his sport coat on. I haven't seen this woman before, so not sure who she is. There's 3 creepers outside. 2 of them are kind of wearing workout jackets or athletic type jackets, and one guy has a button-up shirt and a tie, and he says, "Do you understand that perception is reality? Then why do you 2 look the way you do?" And he, pointing at the guy with the tie, looks the way he does. "When I send you out on a trip, what do you think people think of you 2? They think you look like them. You could be one of them. When you walk through an airport, what do you think the perception is of you? Do you think it's power or wealth? Look at you 2, and look at him." He straightens the guy's tie a little bit. "I'm here to make every single life I touch extraordinary. Do you understand that? When it becomes laborious or when it becomes a sacrifice to you, that means you are looking for the exit ramp and not the highway ahead to where the sign reads unlimited power, unlimited success. Do you 2 understand? Get your act together and show me you want it." And then to the guy who's wearing a tie, he says, "I have an opportunity for you." And then they walk off and go on into the building, and that was the end of that. So again, we are continuing on the idiosyncrasies of Vince McMahon, which is really funny. That he wants everybody to be wearing a suit and tie when they're out in public, when they are traveling, because they want them, even if it's completely out of character, they want them in a suit. He wants them in a suit and tie at all times, unless they are wrestling or something like that. Then we have actually a backstage interview. It's super quick with Britt Baker. Somebody is holding a microphone, and then you never saw who was actually holding the microphone. I think it was Lexi's voice, but she might not have actually been there. Britt Baker still has blood all over her face, asks how she's feeling, and that if Hikaru Shida lived up to her number 1 rank. Britt basically says that number 1 means you should be a role model, and says that Hikaru Shida is a dirty wrestler and what she did out there was dirty, and she's lucky that she didn't touch her teeth. And then she pauses for a second and she says, "And even if she did, I could fix them anyways because I'm a dentist." And that was really the end of that. So again, Britt Baker is still running the heel persona as the dentist, and I think it's been working well. I just wish she'd tighten up her in-ring work a bit. More Moxley and Hager video package, very, very similar to the one earlier in the night. They use a lot of it wasn't the same footage, but it was like the same setups. So it was just like more of the sit-down interviews of both of them, of Hager's wife and coach and all that stuff. But again, narration was great. It just continues to build this, kind of gives a feel of how these guys are. Jake Hager being the prize fighter, and Jon Moxley being the guy who just likes to bust skulls. He even said at one point he likes the sound of busting somebody's skull or putting people through barbed wire or stuff like that. And then next week is going to be Jon Moxley versus Jake Hager in a no-holds-barred empty arena match. So I'm curious how that goes. I wonder where they filmed it. I'm curious if they filmed it at Daly's place a few weeks ago and had the match there, because I have not seen either of them in the venue that they have been filming in. So we will see if those two show up at all at that venue. So I'm thinking it might actually take place at Daly's place, and they filmed it a couple weeks ago or whatever. At this point, next up, there's a Matt Hardy video. He is in his garage. He is in his broken persona and outfit. Says that Jericho is le hole of the ass, and mentions Jericho being in the tub that is hot in leather pants, making fun of that from last week, which was probably one of my favorite segments of all time in professional wrestling. Says that Sammy is a false god. They call him a Spanish god, but he is actually a false god, and he's probably even a false Latino and doesn't even speak Spanish. He runs down the rest of the inner circle. He says Santana Ortiz are Puerto Rican, and he loves Puerto Rican food, so he can't wait to sink his teeth into them. He eventually calls on... he actually talks about how Jake Hager used to be very smart, but now Jericho has brainwashed him, and he's a Jakenstein, and all you have to do is put 2 bolts in his neck, and the look will be complete. He then calls on Vanguard 1 to bring him the t-shirt. Actually, before that, he says that the Inner Circle will never take over AEW, and he's going to see to that. Then calls on to Vanguard 1 to bring him the t-shirt, and Vanguard 1 flies down. It's actually a new Matt Hardy t-shirt, and he says, "No, I'm glad to see my resplendent," and all his words that he likes to use, "wonderful new shirt," but he's talking about the one that Jericho gave him last week, and Vanguard says, "It's fire," and Matt Hardy's like, "What?" And Vanguard replies that it's a dumpster fire, and then they show the shirt burning in a fire pit, and he goes, "Oh, it's a literal dumpster fire, okay." And then Matt Hardy challenges Jericho to come to the Hardy compound for Elite Deletion, and now we will see how this actually goes, because it's actually reported that they haven't made a decision if they are actually going to do this match. So we have Matt Hardy here challenging Jericho, but obviously Jericho has not accepted the challenge, but I don't know why they wouldn't do the match. Of course, with WWE doing the matches that they did for WrestleMania, the Boneyard match and the Firefly Funhouse, I don't know if they could get away right now with doing another very cinematic, wacky type of match that WWE just did 2 of. Though personally, I have not seen either of those matches because I have completely stopped watching WWE for a couple of years at this point. So it would be new to me, and I would love to see Chris Jericho and him bring probably Sammy, Santana, and Ortiz as backup to the compound. I don't think it would work with Jake Hager there, but having those 4 of the Inner Circle go to the Hardy compound and have some sort of altercation there, I think would probably be TV gold, and would be looking forward to seeing that. Next up, we had Brodi Lee versus a jobber whose name was Lee Johnson, and it was a straight squash. Nothing really to talk about here, other than when Brodi Lee was leaving the ring, Marco Stunt was at ringside behind the barricade and was like looking at him, and Marco Stunt's like looking at, you could see his gears turning on. I was like, this guy's staring at me, what am I supposed to do, and he gives this little meager wave, and then he kind of has a look up on his face. It's like, nailed it, something along those lines. It was pretty funny if you watch that one little part. And then next up, we have the main event of the evening, which is the first round. So we're starting at the quarterfinals. So the first quarterfinals match of the TNT title tournament, we have Shawn Spears versus Cody Rhodes. Winner goes on to face the winner of who knows, I'm not sure when this match is going to take place, Sammy Guevara versus Darby Allin, which I'm assuming is taking place next week. Since both of them were there last week, so they were present in the building. I believe everybody who's in the TNT tournament was on the show last week in some form, I think. So anyways, They really had a back and forth match to start off. This match went really, really long. It was well over 20 minutes, including the commercial breaks. I was watching on Fight. They actually did cut to commercial. Normally on Fight, they continue the match through the commercial break. I think they just had to cut the matches in such a way to fill the time, so they didn't have it completely timed correctly to fill a live commercial break. So they just went to the AEW logo with music playing on Fight. So basically everything that was on TNT is exactly what was shown on Fight as well. So there wasn't a difference. Normally there is sometimes a difference between what is on TNT versus Fight, but in this case there wasn't, and what you saw is what everybody at Fight saw. Starts off with a bit of back and forth. Spears throws a chair into the ring at one point, but really it never comes into play. It just got kicked out of the ring a minute later. Shawn Spears gives Cody a pile driver for a 2 count. They end up fighting to the outside, and Shawn Spears takes apart one of the barricades. He actually takes it off the feet and takes the fabric AEW logo, TNT logo off the barricade, and he sets it up at an angle on the ring apron to the floor. So it's like a 45-degree angle from the edge of the ring to the floor. Looked like Cody was going to give Spears a facebuster, but then Spears gives Cody a suplex onto the barricade. Of course, all this was done in front of the ref, but I believe in commentary they did kind of mention it a little bit. It is ref's discretion. This is an important match. It's for the tournament, so they kind of have to make it work, and that's how it goes. And we have what are you doing? Okay. Sorry about that. Then Cody whips Spears with his weight belt, and Aubrey is not happy about that one. Cody throws it out into the crowd. Billy Gunn catches it and fanboys out about it, and Jericho mentions as such. After a commercial break, Shawn Spears is pulling out a table from underneath the ring, but Cody ends up doing a dive to the outside, but then Cody ends up setting up the table on the outside. A little while later, they're fighting into the ring. Cody gets tossed over the top rope, kind of like a Death Valley driver, kind of a fireman's carry, whatever you want to call it, AA, or over the top rope, through the table. Brandy is out there kind of trying to get him to come to. He barely answers the 10 count. He gets in the ring at 9. Then Cody ends up hitting 2 crossroads for a 2 count, and then puts on the figure 4, and Spears ends up getting pinned while in the figure 4, kind of like he just couldn't take it anymore and just couldn't bring himself to pull his shoulders off the mat while he was getting pinned. So Jericho said he's never seen this finish before, but I've definitely seen this finish before. Ric Flair has used it a few times over the many, many years. I'm not sure if Jericho legitimately had never seen it. I'm pretty sure he has probably seen that finish a bunch of times. He just didn't happen to recall it, because I don't think it's probably happened in many, many years, especially in any of the wrestling that he would have seen. I don't think it would have really happened anywhere for the most part. So that's what it was. The match was okay. I think a crowd probably would have definitely helped it. It was just a little strange because they used the barricade that Cody took a suplex into, and then the table, which Cody then went through, and those are not disqualifications. So a little loose with the rules on that one, and the match just felt way too long. It went through at least 2 commercial breaks that I can remember. I believe it started with 25 minutes left real time in the show, so the match was probably actually 20 minutes, because I'm guessing when they cut up the footage, they just built in that extra time for the commercials. So probably if you were there in person, the match was probably 18 minutes or so, but it just went way too long, especially with those commercial breaks just kind of slowing it down. It just felt super, super long. And hopefully, I think at this point we're starting to learn that some of these long matches just don't work without crowds. I've heard a lot of people talk about the match between Edge and Randy Orton at WrestleMania, and then counter programmed to this match on NXT, Gargano and Ciampa had a very, very hour plus long match as well, and a lot of people are feeling that these things are not working very well. So I think if they're going to do matches, they're going to have to stick to shorter matches and do a lot more of those video packages. Because like if they made video packages like they did for Moxley versus Hager, I think we would be doing great. If they did video packages for like everybody in that type of style, then we could learn a lot more about people and get some emotion behind these characters, because a lot of them are not very well developed. And at this point, Moxley and Jericho are definitely two of the most well developed characters, just because they've had a lot of promo time and video package time. Cody as well. And I want to see that effort put into everybody else. They have the time now, because you shouldn't be putting on these long matches until we can get back to having matches in front of crowds. I think they need to rely more on these video packages, and they can fill up the time a lot better. And they said that they've filmed enough matches to get them out to near the end of May, through to where Double or Nothing is supposed to be, which I'm assuming is not going to be happening. I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know if they're just going to say, forget Double or Nothing this year, or are they going to do an empty arena pay-per-view, which I think would be a very, very bad idea. I don't think you're going to get much buys, especially because they don't have a network or something like that. So I think it would behoove them to just scrap Double or Nothing, continue on what they're doing, and make these video packages, because there's so much stuff going on. You're going to have to slow it down, because a lot of this stuff is going to have to take place in front of crowds. So the blood and guts match, we still have the Elite versus the Inner Circle. So how do we stretch that out to something that was supposed to happen a couple of weeks ago, to something that's probably not even going to happen until August or September, maybe even later, because we have no idea when they're going to be able to have matches in front of crowds in an arena that would make sense to do the match in. You don't want to have this match in front of 200 people. You want to have it in a regular arena in front of 5,000 plus. So what do they do with this? I mean, we have Jon Moxley and Hager. So this is going to be Jon Moxley defending the title. But where were they going into Double or Nothing? Was it going to be a rematch between Jericho and Moxley? So right now, I think everything is in flux. But how do we stretch out all these storylines that are in flight and need conclusions, but doing the conclusions in this format that we've been seeing, that we're going to be seeing for the foreseeable future? I don't think it works. So I think we need some roadblocks that work in this format. So I think doing Matt Hardy and Jericho at the Hardy compound is a good way to take up a half hour of a show and continue that on and build tension between Jericho and Matt Hardy. And that keeps the Elite story going on. We have Brodi Lee coming in and kind of revamping the Dark Order. Seems like the third time they've been revamped. How is that going to work out? I'm loving the vignettes, or the video packages, whatever you want to call them. I think they're great. I'm giggling the whole way because I know a lot of the stories of the idiosyncrasies of Vince McMahon. And for those who don't know, these are all idiosyncrasies in real life of Vince McMahon. He wants everybody to wear suits. Last week, somebody yawned in front of him. He hates when that happens. The week before, somebody sneezed. hates that too. It's like something that would kill your push or get you fired or get you seriously handicapped in some sort of way if you did it in real life. So I mean, it is what it is. And how are they going to now build the Dark Order? Because kind of he's kind of being like a douche, and I don't know why anybody would want to be in the Dark Order. But I think now this week with him pulling a guy aside who was dressed for success, to use a cliche phrase, that it could move into something where it shows why people would put up with this crap from this guy, because there is reward at the end of the tunnel if you follow his rules, and that it would be rewarding in the end to be part of the Dark Order. So we will see how that goes. I'm intrigued at this point. I've been intrigued for a few weeks before Brodi Lee showed up in regards to the Dark Order. I really hated them early on. I think they've kind of rehabbed enough that the Dark Order is not total crap at this point, and it could end up being a very interesting story. And if they continue on doing the video packages how they are, because they are in a narrative format, they are taking place as if the camera is not there. And I am 100% behind narrative format segments. As I've said in the past, the problem is if they're going to use a narrative format, then the commentators cannot acknowledge what happens in them. They can't acknowledge that the video was shown to everybody, even though in real life it was. You got to take the Lucha Underground route, and anything that happens in a narrative format is completely ignored by all the wrestlers who are not there and the commentators who are not there. It is for the audience to know only, and I'm perfectly fine with that format as long as they stick to that. I think it's when they acknowledge the video that is where the problem is. And I like the vignettes, and I like how they're shot, and I like the narrative format. I'm a big fan of it. Just you gotta separate it from the sport feel of it. It's information just for the audience, not for the rest of the participants in what is this fictional fight club, if you will. Then that type of stuff can fit seamlessly in there and makes way more sense if it's not acknowledged by those who weren't there and shouldn't be privy to this information. I think it'd make way more sense. And then they could do more stuff like that outside of just the Dark Order stuff, and bring some of that, which I thought was great of Lucha Underground, bringing in some of that narrative format, some of that behind the scenes stuff that the audience is privy to, but the wrestlers and commentary play it off as they are not. And if you do that type of stuff, just just turn off the audio to the commentators' headsets so they don't even see it, and tell them do not watch the show back or something like that, so they can legitimately be in the dark. And then they don't have to dance around it or accidentally trip up and say something that they shouldn't be privy to. I think that'd be perfectly fine. So it is going to be very interesting to see how these shows go. We've seen a few repeats on wrestlers showing up. So how many more times are we going to see Cody wrestle? How many more times are we going to see Kenny wrestle? The best friends, because they all wrestled last week as well. So they were obviously there for the tapings. Like I said, there were some people in the crowd, a couple that I didn't know who they were. Danny Jordan, who is a female wrestler. She is good. I'm assuming she's on some, she was in a dark taping, or hopefully she actually does show up on Dynamite, because that would be nice to see. So I don't know who we haven't seen yet, who is there to do matches with. I guess time will tell. And we are just experiencing a very interesting time in wrestling because of just what's going on in the world and what they have to do to get around or cope with it. So I hope this comes to an end quickly, but I have a feeling we're going to be seeing this type of show from everybody. Who knows until August, September? Who the heck knows? It could be a year from now when we finally kind of get back into normalcy and we can have large crowds assembling once again. So we'll see. Thanks a lot, everybody, for joining me this week for That's Wrestling. Remember, if you would like to be a co-host for this show, shoot me an email, eric@thatswrestling.com. I'm looking for AEW co-hosts, New Japan co-hosts, or you can do both. You can do one. You can be a fill-in if you want. If I don't have anybody, I can call on you and you'll join me, and we can talk some AEW. We can talk some New Japan, which New Japan hasn't been doing much. But anyways, eric@thatswrestling.com. If you're watching this on YouTube, you like to get it as a podcast. It's on all your favorite podcast apps. If you're listening to this as a podcast, I do the show live on YouTube the night after Dynamite airs, and then New Japan is whenever, because New Japan's schedule is weird, and of course they haven't really done anything for quite a while. But anyways, if you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell notification, so when I schedule when I'm going live, you will be notified, so you'll know ahead of time. Usually for AEW Dynamite, it might be a couple hours. It could be a day. If I decide on Thursday, I just don't have the time to do it on Thursday night, I can schedule it for Friday, so you know to tune in the next night instead, and all that fun stuff. So be sure to do that. Be sure to leave a review over on iTunes or whatever podcast app allows you to do reviews. That would be great. Shoot me an email, eric@thatswrestling.com. If you have any questions, comments, feedback, will want to alert me of your review, just as a general mailbag, eric@thatswrestling.com. You can find me on Twitter as well, @thatswrestling1 with the number 1 at the end of it. Somebody already has the other one and they haven't touched it since 2012, and I wish I could have it, but you know. All right, thanks a lot for watching and listening, and I will see you next time on That's Wrestling. See you later, guys.